Hi everyone, I'm Todd Winther. I'm wearing a dark coloured shirt. I am in my 40s. I have short brown hair. Welcome. I am an NDIS subject matter specialist at Disability Services Consulting. I would like to welcome you back for another open dialogue. These dialogue events are a place for people with disabilities in our community to talk openly and frankly about the things that matter to us. This is our last open dialogue event for the year. So today is all about looking back at 2025 and reflecting on some of the big moments for our community, as well as what we're talking about next. But before I get into it, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land in which we gather. I'm joining you for the Turrbal and Yagara lands in Brisbane. I recognise their continued connection to the land and the waters of this beautiful place and acknowledge that they never ceded sovereignty. I want to pay respects to elders and ancestors and any First Nations peoples here today.
Thanks, Todd. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Trelaw. I'm an autistic and physically disabled policy and advocacy specialist. I'm particularly interested in the rights of First Nations people with disability. I'm a feminine presenting person, 50 years old. I've got dark red hair, wearing bright green glasses, some really fabulous earrings, which are red, orange, and yellow, and wearing a black top. I'm joining you from Kaurna country today, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So just in case anyone's wondering, we do a visual description of ourselves so that people who are blind or have low vision know who is speaking and what they look like. And it's just a part of making meetings and events accessible for everyone as much as possible. So for those who have not been to one of our events before, welcome. This open dialogue is designed to be inclusive, accessible, collaborative, respectful, and importantly, fun. I do need to give a big shout out to our partners. So Dana, Disability Advocacy Network Australia, Inclusion Australia, Alliance 20, and the Melbourne Disability Institute. We are funded through an information linkages and capacity building, which is an ILC grant was from the Department of Social Services, but has now gone to an acronym that I can't remember with the Health Department. So now we do have just a little bit of housekeeping today to make sure that everyone has an idea of how today will go. We really want to create a safe and open and inclusive space for everyone. So firstly, as part of that, AI tools are not allowed. We know they can be a useful tool for people with disability, but we also want to protect everyone's privacy. We will be uploading a transcript to the event page just shortly after this event is over, and we'll also send it to you via email. Secondly, we try really hard to stick to time to make sure that we hear from all of our guests and have time to hear from you, our audience members. This means we might have to interrupt and move things along sometimes, and I promise you we're not being rude. We do encourage you to have your camera on if you're comfortable with that, so that we can feel like we're sort of in the room together, but we also acknowledge that for some people they may need to or want to have that off, and that's completely fine too. And we're going to be collecting all of your comments and questions in the chat throughout the event, and may even invite you to ask your question on the microphone if you would like to.
So it's been another really big year for people with disability and our community. You might have seen a survey that we sent through before the event that was totally optional. So don't worry if you didn't get to it. But in the survey, we asked a few questions to hear your thoughts on what 2025 has been like for you. We'll bring up some of the results now because we think it's a great way to kick off the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'll do a visual description. We have a few slides that have charts, and we also, on those, we have the text responses from people who took the optional survey. So the first question is, overall, do you think 2025 was a good year for people with disability and their community? It's a very interesting question. And what we're showing is a pie chart that shows 14% of people said yes, it was a good year for people with disability. 14% said no, it was a bad year for people with disability. And then 71% said there were some good parts and some bad parts. The second question is about why people thought it was a good bad year. And we've pulled out some quotes from the survey. So some of the responses were just too much confusion in NDIS and not getting new information in an accessible way. I think some of these will come to no surprise to some of you listening today. Improved broader understanding of what is required to meet NDIS standards, improved service delivery for people living with disability, stronger platforms to give agency to people with disability, and greater ways to hear people's voices and build upon choice and control. So, well, there's some very different experiences here just based on those two responses. We've got one more quote that we wanted to pull up though. And this one is, there have been many bad things that have occurred in 2025, but the one constant standout for me is that our disability community and advocates have continued to show up and support one another and continue to fight the good fight. And I think that's really true. I know from my experience in the disability community, I just truly think there is so much strength and resilience in our community, and we do show up for one another time after time after time, even when we shouldn't have to. We know we've still got a long way to go around disability rights, but we're fighting a very good fight indeed. Okay, so Todd, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce our first guest.
Thanks, Kelly. That's right. I'm very excited to introduce our first guest for today, Naz Campanella. I'm sure Naz's voice is going to be very familiar to you because she was the first blind newsreader to operate a studio live on air. So many of you would have heard her on Triple J. Naz is now the ABC's Disability Affairs reporter. She's blind and has Charcot-Marie-Tooth, a condition that prevents her from reading Braille. She reports on disability issues across Australia, speaks globally on inclusion and leadership, and shares her journey as a mum with disability. Naz also volunteers internationally and is an ambassador to several disability organisations. Thanks for joining us, Naz. We're really excited to have you today. Firstly, can you please give us a visual description of yourself?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Todd, for that lovely introduction. And thank you more broadly to you and your team at the Disability Dialogue for asking me to come to this final event today. I'm thrilled to be here with you all. I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I am on, the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. In terms of an audio description of myself, I am a white woman in her now approaching late 30s. I have shoulder-length dark brown hair. I am wearing a black and white dress with some floral print on it. And I have a very boring background behind me. I do apologize. So that's who I am.
So let's get into it, Naz. In your role as a journalist, you do an incredible job of shining a light on some of the challenges that people with disability face. Can you tell us about some of the challenges you've reported on this year?
Yeah, I think it's probably an understatement to say that it has been a challenging year for the disability community, Todd. I think a couple that really stand out to me was the announcement around the Thriving Kids program. I think a lot of people felt that they were taken by surprise by that announcement. I think there were also a lot of people who felt that it was a really good thing that for too long there has not been an alternative for people who don't necessarily need to be within the NDIS, that really within the states and territories there has been no services for people with disability. And so I think on one hand, there were some people who felt really confident that this could be that next step and that hopefully it would mean some support outside of the scheme that was very much long overdue. But I think what people needed was to know more about the plan, to have a reassurance that they weren't going to be left in the lurch, that their children and their loved ones were not going to be left in the lurch. And also that really ultimately people with disability, I found in speaking to people and their families, they don't actually care where the services come from. They just want to know that if and when they do need them, that they are there, that they're accessible, they're inclusive, that the people running these services are fully trained in disability awareness, and that the services aren't going to be a one-size-fits-all approach, that they will be still a tailored approach for individual circumstances. But really, I think ultimately what people want out of Thriving Kids and about the future of disability, whether it's the care sector or children's services, daycare, schools, whatever it is, that nobody will be left behind and that the only option will not be the NDIS. So I think that's been one challenge. I think the other key one has been discussions around linking autism to certain medications.
Yeah.
I think that the autistic community was left feeling really horrible, really isolated, really questioning, well, who are we? We are autistic. It is who we are. It makes up a big part of who we are. And I think a lot of the autistic people I spoke to said to me, we already face so much prejudice and judgment and questioning in the community about who we are and the way we are and the way we sort of communicate. And this just goes further to fuel that. And so I remember we were talking about how we would approach that. And for me, it was about going out and finding autistic voices and saying to them, what do you want to say about this? And it felt like a really powerful piece to do for the community. And I was conscious that I'm not an autistic person. But I hoped that people could see that I was a vehicle for, allowing to put those autistic voices front and center on a day that it really needed, that those voices really needed to be front and center. I also should have acknowledged that hearing this particular piece of news may be traumatic for some people on this call, and I apologize for that. I should have actually sort of maybe given a little bit of a trigger warning. But I hope you know that you are seen, you are heard, that your experience matters, that you matter, and that your way of life matters. So yes.
Well said, Naz. On a more positive note, one of the stories that I read from you this year was about a deaf playgroup for kids. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't shy away from the fact that there are really positive stories out there. While I mostly hear about the negative, I tend to have a really strong philosophy that I do one story that needs to be done, and then I do a story that is positive, or in my words, a story for me, because it's just as important to look after my psyche because I am hearing about lots of really traumatic and sad stuff every single day. So for me, my rule is I do one story that needs to be done, whatever that looks like, and then I do a really nice story. And one of the goals I had this year was to elevate the deaf and deafblind communities. And when I was on maternity leave or parental leave, and I was thinking about playgroups to take my little boy to, we went to sensory play, we went off to swimming, and we went off to library for story time. And one of the things that I thought about was, how do mums who are deaf bring their kids along to these things when there were no Auslan interpreters and rarely even something as basic as a hearing loop available? And so I wanted to do a story on some of those services, and I found a deaf play group. And it was for parents who were deaf, but it was also for children who were deaf. And the story was much broader than that. I wanted to look at, what is deaf culture? Why is it so important? How does it work? And I found the most beautiful case study. I found a hearing couple who had two daughters, and their eldest daughter was hearing, but then their second daughter was born deaf. And they had made the decision that because their daughter was born deaf, it was her birthright to remain part of the deaf community. And they had decided to foster a bilingual approach, because in the mum's words, if we were going to ask our daughter to meet us halfway and have cochlear implants and try and speak, we need to make sure that she always has access to Auslan, so that when she gets older, she has the choice as to what language she wants to use and the kind of approach she wants to take. And so I spoke to lots of different people, including deaf people, about what deaf culture was and the need to instill in parents that it's about choice for their children. And it was just the most fun, exhilarating, wonderful story to put together. And we had such a great response from people in the wider community. So it was just a beautiful one to work on.
We've touched a bit about this already, but one of the topics that you write about regularly and discuss is obviously the NDIS. Can you tell us about any of the stories you've written related to the scheme that really stand out to you?
One of the big things that we explored this year was the idea of the trust really shifting in the NDIS from the broader public. And I think because so much of the discussion in recent time has been about the cost and fraud and the need to cut cost, all conversations that everyone on this call would agree obviously need to happen. But I think one of the things that has happened is that perhaps the broader public has started to see the NDIS as not working as efficiently as, for some people who have spoken to me, being a waste of money, and are their taxpayer dollars being spent wisely? And I think what we ignore in the conversations when we solely have media reporting around cost is we forget that it is still a transformative scheme that has helped hundreds of thousands of people. Many people who were never getting supports and services before the scheme came about. And while it, in many people's words, possibly isn't working as efficiently, and there is costs that need to come down, I think that messaging about actually there are a lot of people really benefiting off this, and people who are able to now get out of bed, have a shower, go out into the community, find work, make friendships, actually be an active member of our community. I think some of that messaging has been lost. And so that's definitely one thing we've focused on. And some of the other things have been the continuation of the bureaucracy within the scheme, and the fact that people are telling us almost on a daily or even, weekly or even daily basis that, funding is being cut with little explanation, that planning meetings are being scheduled sometimes even without warning. And so those are some of the things that we have covered. But I want to say that I think it's really important, and I know that we, everyone as a community is doing this, but it's so important that it is acknowledged that it is a scheme that is still changing people's lives. And even though it might not necessarily be the easiest scheme to navigate, there are people who are really, their lives have been transformed because of it. And I don't think we can underestimate or forget that. And it's
Yes,
important to make sure that we do that, that reporters, whether they're disabled or not, continue to reinforce that message as well. And that you as a community continue to do that as well. And I don't want to detract from the idea that there's a lot of struggles at the moment. There absolutely is. I'm hearing about them constantly. So I don't want to take away from that. And it's important we reflect that. But yeah, just the positive nature of it too.
so you talk about the individual progress narrative through the NDIS about generating lots of positive change. If I can sort of broaden that out a bit and talk about what progress do you think the disability community and the sector has made as a whole this year?
I think one of the key things was the launch of the autism strategy. It's Australia's first. We're following other countries that already have one. I think it was, led by autistic people. It was widely consulted on, and it is essentially a blueprint for anything and everything from language right through to the way people want to be described and the key things that are important to the autistic community. I think that needed to be celebrated as a really big win. I think Claire Gibolini and her team did a brilliant job. I've heard a lot of very familiar names jumping on this call. I've got my screen reading software speaking into my ear as everyone comments and jumps on. So I don't know if Claire's on this call, but the work that the team did about that, it's really important that we have some really basic standards that the autistic community can point to when they are talking about their rights and what they should have access to.
So, because we're talking about the end of 2025 and doing a bit of a recap, can you tell us about one highlight from your year? It doesn't have to be work related, just one highlight that really stood out to you in 2025.
Oh, this is a really hard question, and I'm actually going to pick two, if that's okay, Todd. Give me the liberty. So, look, I think the first thing that I'm really excited about, and I can actually share it with you because it's been shared on social media this morning, is that my really good friend Eliza Hull and I are writing, or have written, a beautiful children's picture book, and it will be coming out this time next year, and it is called All the Ways I See. It is going to be published through Allen and Unwin. So we're really proud to have such a big publisher on board. And the reason, I guess, how this book came about is that I never read about characters that reflected my experience when I was a little girl. And then when I had my little boy, there were really no books that we could read together that he could see his mum reflected in, or my experience, or use the language that I was using, that mummy can't see with her eyes, she sees with her hands. And so Eliza, who already has published a couple of really beautiful children's books and a collection of stories from disabled parents, we have been friends for a long time. We've swapped parenting stories for a long time, and we decided that we would team up and write a beautiful text together. And we are confident that what we are producing is actually the world's first fully accessible children's picture book. And what we have done is we've got text that's in Braille, we've got easy to turn pages for people who have issues with their dexterity in their fingers. We have QR codes for Auslan interpretations of the book and audio descriptions of the book. We are composing music to go with it. And we're trying to make sure that we kind of tackle two things in this book. We have disabled people's experiences being more widely reflected in storytelling. But then we hope that anyone will read the book, and non-disabled people will be able to start conversations with their children or among themselves and their communities to have some more broader conversations about disability and the way that we live our lives. Sorry, that was a very long-winded way of explaining that we basically have a book out next year.
No,
We're so excited.
that's fantastic news, and I can understand why you want to go on about it because it's actually revolutionary
Yeah,
Yeah,
we hope so. And look,
yeah.
the other second thing, if I can just quickly share, is that
No.
I went into daycare a few weeks ago and, to do the general daycare drop off. And a couple of the kids had seen me read Eliza's first children's book come over to my house on Play School. And I explained how I was blind and how I don't read with my fingertips or my eyes. I actually read with my ears. And a couple of the kids came over to me and said, "We saw you on Play School, and do you think you could read the book to us now?"
Oh,
And
wow.
I pulled the book over, I got my audio version out, and I sat in the circle, even though I was so late for work. And all the kids sat around and we read this book together. And what I loved was that by them being immersed in disability, they are going to be incredible allies for our community and our next generation of disabled kids. And I couldn't be more proud of that.
That's terrific. Thanks, Naz. Over to you, Kelly. You're on mute there, Kelly.
Oh, can we unmute Kelly
Yeah.
There we
centrally?
go,
There we
Thank
go.
Kelly.
There we
you.
go.
I
There we
didn't
go.
realize I had been muted. Sorry about that. Um, excellent. So look, what I was saying was Naz and Todd, what a fabulous conversation. That was phenomenal. We've had some questions come in via the chat, and we do have time for just one or maybe two. Unfortunately, it's a bit shorter than usual because Naz, I know you have to jump off a bit early today. So
Probably
the
also
first
because I talked too much. I'm sorry. We've run out of time.
never. Look, we could have kept going. Absolutely could have kept going. But look, this is one I'm really interested in too. So you're the disability, as most of us know, you're the disability affairs reporter at the ABC, which is a national news service and goes beyond that. Your stories reach hundreds of thousands of people. How do you feel about that level of responsibility?
Oh, I don't take it lightly. I never have. I've never taken this position for granted. It is a huge responsibility, but it's also a huge privilege. Like, I pitched the idea for this disability affairs round, and I did it because at that time in 2019, the Disability Royal Commission was, really getting underway, and I wanted to ensure that us as an organization that we did that reporting justice. And, other reporters would have done a really good job, but this needed an extra level of care and attention and empathy. And I didn't want to give anyone an excuse, whether it be, at the ABC or more broadly across the media landscape in Australia, any excuse to say, oh, was that story worth telling? And so I also wanted to make sure that we had visible representation of a disabled person and disabled people at the helm of the coverage. I thought it was really important because if people were going to share their deepest traumas with a platform like the Royal Commission, really for the world to hear and pay attention to, they needed to know that their story was in good hands. And so that's really why it started. But I think it's really important as well to make sure that, we're supporting people in the best way possible to be a part of our stories. And many of the people we've worked with either haven't had any experience with the media, and if they have, it's often been quite negative. It's been a really bad experience for them. And so part of the job, actually a very big part of the job, is really about the people skills. It's about making sure that if someone's part of our story and they agree to be interviewed, do they know what an interview will look and feel like? Do they know who the members of the crew are going to be that turn up to their house? Where are they going to stand? What are they going to be doing? We create storyboards for people who need it. We might sit on a couple of Zoom coffee catch-ups with people so they get to know us and trust us. We might, I've actually been known to kind of get my producers down on all fours to measure the doorways and spaces in our studios to make sure that if someone's coming in a powered wheelchair, that we don't have that awkwardness of, sorry, we've got to find another studio because your chair can't fit in here. actually we need to do that work beforehand so that we can make sure our studios are fit for purpose. And so look, I will say that I'm an expert in 2 disabilities, and they're my own. I don't pretend to be an expert in anybody else's. That's why I'm the journalist who is asking you all about yours. And I won't always get it right. There have been times where I've had lots of emails from people saying, why did you use that photo? Or that language was off, or whatever. But more often than not, I'm happy to report that the experience has been really positive for people. So look, in short, I don't take it for granted. It is a big responsibility. I don't always get it right, but I try. And this community will no doubt continue to keep me in check.
No doubt either. And look, thank you for also bringing up about the DRC. I know there's myself worked on it, and there's a few people in the room. I saw Alistair McEwen earlier, and obviously yourself and Natalie that's coming up next. And just your coverage of that, I think, was absolutely critical. So thank you so much. Look, we understand we're running short of time now. And we understand you've got to head off for a story. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing both those stories, but also those critical insights with us today.
Thank you to everyone so much for having me. Really appreciate it. And I know we're only 5 weeks away, but if you celebrate, Merry Christmas, and otherwise, just I hope everyone has a safe and happy break.
Thanks, Nat. So now I'd like to introduce our next guest, Natalie Wade. So Natalie is regarded as one of Australia's foremost disability human rights lawyers. She's currently the Associate Commissioner of the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission, following her role as founder and principal lawyer of Equality Lawyers. Welcome, Natalie. Thanks so much for joining us. Could you please give us a visual description of yourself?
Sorry, I just had some tech issues. Good afternoon, everyone. I am a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair, brown cat-sized glasses, and a teal and white scarf, and I'm sitting in my electric wheelchair at my desk in my office. Very boring.
Yeah. And where are you located? And what country?
Yes, thank you for asking. So I'm really privileged to be coming to you today from Ghana country, and I pay my deep respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I would like to acknowledge any First Nations people that are with us today.
So first off, can you tell us about what you do as the Associate Commissioner at the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission?
Thanks so much for asking. I think there's probably a really official answer to this, and then there's going to be the version that I thought I might share with you all today, which is not contrary to the official version, but perhaps I can add a little bit more colour and movement to the role. So I was appointed as Associate Commissioner at the same time that Louise Glanville was appointed as Commissioner. So we developed a bit of a co-leadership model where we stand together and lead the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission, which, as you all know, is the national regulator for NDIS supports and services. So I guess, so my role by way of, position description is one that is firmly focused on strategic leadership, and several of our divisions report into me and I provide oversight to them and this sort of thing. But I thought it might be a little bit more interesting to share a bit of a week in the life of, rather than just running through the PD, which you can access online or you might have to write. Anyway, never mind. And so my weeks look a bit like this, everyone. I spend quite a lot of time meeting with external stakeholders, and external stakeholders at the Commission are quite varied. So we sit in the portfolio of the Commonwealth Australian Public Service, which delivers the NDIS. So in the portfolio, there's us at the Commission, the NDIA, and then the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. And the three bodies make up the whole, and we all work quite closely together. And so I meet quite a lot with my colleagues and peers at the agency and at the department. I spend a part of my week meeting with the minister and telling her a little bit about what the Commission is up to, with Louise as well. I also spend some parts of some weeks meeting with often CEOs of providers and large industry peak bodies, whether they are from the provider side, like the National Disability Services, or from the disability community side, organisations like DANA or AFTO, or any of the DROs. And so making sure that there are opportunities and time for us to share ideas and share insights, but also have time to ask each other questions and share concerns that might be arising. Then I spend some part of my week with our internal teams. So internally, our legal division reports to me. So many of you may have known me in previous lives as a lawyer. So I continue to be a lawyer at the Commission. And in addition to being Associate Commissioner, I'm Chief Legal Counsel here. And so I spend some time with our lawyers, and then I spend some time with our practice quality division, who deliver our behaviour support function under the Act. So yeah, it's really quite varied. I also do quite a bit of public speaking and engagement across sector and community. So yeah, it's really, I guess, varied, and there's certainly no day that's quite the same. And there's a lot of work that goes in to supporting Louise and I in our roles from our teams and from the Commission more broadly, which is really fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thank you for keeping what is a very fancy official title, like really real for us, and giving that insight. I do want to ask, what's it like being a person with disability in a position of leadership in the NDIS space?
Yeah, I've been giving this a lot of thought lately, Kelly. So I've just been in the role now for just over a year. So I guess that sort of timing always makes you pause and reflect. Plus, this time of year tends to do that as well. And it's been really interesting as a disabled person in a leadership role like this. It's interesting to me in two ways. One is that it is really important, it strikes me. And I know that we say this in somewhat the abstract, but it's certainly been my experience that it is incredibly important to have people with disability who have lived experience of what decisions are being made about at the table, actually in a decision-making role. I found that to be really valuable. So I receive services every single day. I can't get out of bed on my own. I can't, do any of that sort of gear. Totally dependent on services, and I always have been as an adult since I left my family home. And it really strikes me in the conversations that I have, whether they're with, the minister, the secretary, internally, whether they're with other portfolio partners, whether they're with other stakeholders, whoever, just the value add that I bring as a person with that lived experience. I also have found, I am pleased to report, that it is valued by my colleagues and it is given the weight that it should have, but it certainly has been clear that it is a valued and important way to approach decision making. And I think that this is something that we need to really invest in. My other sort of reflection on the flip side is that having a leadership role in the Commonwealth, which is where, as you all know, the NDIS is driven from the Commonwealth public service and also the government more generally, that having a disability that impacts on your everyday life, the way you get around or the way you organise your day, is certainly something that requires accommodation in these sorts of roles. And it's something that requires quite a bit of education and thought by me and those supporting me to deliver in this role. So, for example, I have to travel quite a lot in this role. We have offices all around the country. It's really important that Louise and I visit our staff in those offices and hear from them directly, but also we have a lot of commitments in Canberra for estimates and for Parliament sitting weeks. And obviously I'm based in Adelaide and Louise is based in Melbourne, so we try and spend some part of our time together as well. And so there's just a lot of travel. That has been really interesting to get resourced in terms of support workers, getting them in those roles, getting people that have good availability, that have good flexibility in their role, and just getting that sort of rocking and rolling a bit. And so I think it has been quite interesting in terms of just sort of very much learning as I'm doing in terms of standing up such a senior role in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing both sort of those perspectives. Acknowledging what I was hearing from you, also that how both your lived experience and lived expertise is valued is phenomenal, and should be the standard for all workplaces for all of us. But we know that some of us are very lucky to be in those, and others not so much. Just going to move on. Can you tell us about one of the big things that you've worked on this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a few really big pieces of work, and I probably can't start this question without acknowledging that maybe as we speak, if not very shortly, the Minister is introducing the Integrity and Safeguarding Bill into the Parliament, and that will see new and also increased powers for the Commissioner to use to strengthen the integrity within the NDIS market, and that's such a huge day for the Commission and its people, and also for providers and people with disabilities. So it's a pretty big piece of work that is literally probably happening right now as I'm speaking. But something else that has been achieved this year is that the Commission, when Louise and I got here, did not have a disability action plan. And it was one of the first decisions that we made as a leadership team to have that put in place. And we were incredibly proud to have the erudite Jax Brown, who's here today, I can see, launch that disability action plan this year. That's a really important piece. The Commission has quite a significant proportion of its staff that identify as having a disability or neurodiversity, but also 50% or 49% of our staff identify as having as being carers. And so we have this really rich representation of disability in our workforce, either by direct lived experience or it's in their world in a way. And so having a disability action plan that will drive the systems and structural response to inclusion in this place was hugely important. I'm really proud that we have done that.
So you should be. I said big things. Both of those are like phenomenally life-changing, really. All right. So finally, I don't know, we've just spoken about some of your work highlights, but could you also tell us, is there another highlight of your year? Certainly don't want to put any words in your mouth, but I know there was a little person that made came into the world. So that you could choose that, or you could completely choose something else.
Well, I feel like you want me to choose that, and so I will very gratefully take the offer. So I have a really incredible, I'm sort of meeting with you all in a very incredible season of life, where I have had the good fortune, obviously, of joining Louise and leading the Commission, but then I started that journey when I was heavily pregnant. And feeling incredibly fat and uncomfortable and way too big for my wheelchair. And then had little Monty in December last year. So he has sort of is as old as my tenure as Associate Commissioner in a way, which is just such a unique experience to be holding a significant role in the Commonwealth while raising this very little baby for most of the year. But it's been really wonderful. It's been such a magical time. I'm sure there are lots of parents with disabilities in the audience today. It's such, I think, a unique experience to parent with a disability. And it is something that we don't talk about often enough. And I can talk about it all day. It's really been super fun, but also very interesting. But it's been magical, and it's definitely not work related, but one of the best things that has happened in my year.
And you're right, just no one can prepare you for this, can they? Although, I say most of us do it, and we're not associate commissioners at the same time, so there's a different level. Really want to acknowledge that. Excellent. Over to you, Todd.
So that was a really fascinating conversation between Kelly and Natalie. Natalie, I have a few questions for you. The first question comes from Jax. How have you embedded disability culture and disability justice in your role?
That's a really good question, Jax. To be honest, I think that's still emerging. What is interesting about my role is that it is like it is initially it it had by my appointment this inherent vibe of being held by a person with a disability. And then Louise and I took this co-leadership approach where we really wanted to see the NDIS led by disabled and non-disabled people, because that's really what the scheme is, right? It's about everyone coming together and delivering for people with disability. But I think that throughout my time at the Commission, I need to work quite thoroughly at ensuring that it's not just the vibe of the thing, and that we do have, as you say, clear articulation of culture and disability justice built within the structure, not only of the role, but also of this place. And so they're really important values to me. And I still feel like, if I'm honest, I'm exploring what that looks like and what that feels like and what that means in a role like this. It's also in a context of an organisation where people with disability have not always been treated super well. And so we had a culture review delivered by Elizabeth Broderick a few months ago, and that found quite clearly that whilst we might be reasonably okay at recruiting people with disability, we don't always do as well when people are in their roles and they need support. And so I think that there is a really important piece for me to do. And to be honest, I feel I will do it with community and not just on my own, to really ensure that disability culture and justice are reflected in the structure and systems of the role, but also the Commission more broadly.
So we've had a bit of a curly question come through from Sam, but I've got every faith you'll handle this very well. When we talk about the roles of the NDIS Quality Safeguards Commission, are we talking about the experience and quality of people's plans or service providers?
Service providers. So the quality of people's plans is firmly in the remit of the NDIA. The Commission only has jurisdiction over providers, registered or unregistered. And so what we say to be quality, either through the code of conduct or through practice standards or our rules, all relate to providers and workers.
So the last question we have is from Andrew. He says, which department has remit for registration of supports? This piece of work has been in the news recently, and as he also said earlier, is about to be introduced into Parliament. So can you give us a bit more detail around that, please?
Yes, I think if I've understood the question right, Andrew. So the Commission is responsible for providing a registration scheme. So we are the registration body that providers have to register with. And there are some mandatory areas of registration like behaviour support or SDA. And there's been a lot of conversations, as all of you have been a part of, around what mandatory registration might look like going forward. So we're responsible for the actual registration scheme, and by the requirements of the NDIS Act, we have a registrar within the Commission who delivers that statutory scheme. But if your question is more sort of who decides if there's mandatory registration or not, the government decide that. It's a decision entirely for the government. And the Department for Health, Disability and Ageing provide policy advice to the government on what registration might happen or might look like. Does that sort of answer your question? Yeah, but we all work quite closely together, and certainly the Commission is significantly involved in conversations around registration. And Louise and I have been quite clear on the record that there needs to be visibility of disability support services.
So Jax has another question, which we actually have just enough time for. Sorry, it's Kelly speaking. And the question from Jax is, I'm also really interested in how you work sustainably or sustainability in your role. How do you have disability leave entitlements at your work?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jax. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. So this is also a bit iterative for me. It's sort of a bit of a work in progress. So I think that so at a structural level, the Commission has, because Louise and I introduced it, disability leave. We offer staff 10 days of disability leave for them to go and attend to whatever needs they need to attend to without it encroaching on their other leave entitlements. So that is available to all staff. They don't need to provide any particular evidence of it, and they can just tell their manager, and that should just flow through. So that is an important structural lever. But in terms of me and how I sort of work it out, I think it's really been a matter of being quite clear with my colleagues about where I'm just going to have to bow out. Like, for example, I have care every night from 5 to 7, right? And if I don't have that, then I literally don't go to the toilet. It's probably not too flash for my health. And so, like, no matter sort of how busy it is or how many things are screaming urgent, like, we just all have to get on board with this idea that I need to be offline for these hours of the day. And I think just communicating and being very clear, which, to be honest, is a little harder than it sounds, I have found, because, you know, one does like to think that it's all very invisible and nothing really particular is needed. And, you know, I can just ignore, you know, what the reality of every day looks like. But yeah, I have found it to be an important sustainability feature to just be quite clear. And because a lot of my colleagues do not have lived experience of physical disability, they would have, like, not an intuitive idea of how long things take or what things actually look like to just get on the loo or to get dressed or to, you know, get to an event or this or that. And so, yeah, I think that it has been helpful as the year has progressed just to sort of be quite boldly, although kind of boringly clear about what this looks like for me. But also with things like travel, right? Like, Louise and I have had some really great conversations about, like, this is pretty intense if we design it in this way, ignoring that I'm in a chair, and I think we need to think about the design of it. And many of you know Louise, many of you are Victorians, and she's this very progressive thinker and is, so she probably leads those conversations a bit more than me, to be entirely honest. But, I think it is important because something that really does come to my mind after a year is I think that it is really critical that we do have disabled leaders in these roles, but we need to think very carefully and clearly about the sustainability of those roles. I think it's absolutely doable. I think I'm just learning a lot, and I don't know, in like some amount of time, maybe I can go on a podcast and be like, here's what my learnings and here's what we all need to know and this is how it can really work. Because we absolutely need and want the NGIS to be led by people with disability and people without disability, but especially people with disability.
Thanks so much, Natalie. We know you have to head off now on this historic day, as you mentioned, but we really appreciate you being here with us. Now we're going to take a 5-minute break before we are joined by our next guest, Carly Wallace, the director of the Disability Dialogue. So grab a drink or whatever you might need, and we'll see you back here in 5.
Thanks, so bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Nat. All right. And we're back. So our next guest is the director of the Disability Dialogue, Carly Wallace. And I'm really privileged to be able to work alongside Carly there. We've talked about what 2025 was like, but now we're really keen to hear it from Carly about what's next. So Carly, welcome, over to you.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you. Thanks to everyone who's online today. Really interesting conversations. So thank you to Naz and Nat and Kelly and Todd for you guys hosting. It's been a pretty awesome convo so far. For those joining online who've never met me before or seen me before, my visual description for you, I am a light-skinned Aboriginal woman with woven earrings and some grey hairs popping through. That's me being cheeky. And I've got some tattoos on my hands as well. As Kelly said, I'm the director of the Disability Dialogue, and my name's Carly Wallace. So I come to you from the Jagera country here on the south side of the Brisbane River, and just want to pay my respects and acknowledge country and to all the mob online joining today. And I also just want to give a shout out to some familiar faces in the room, including a former colleague. It feels weird saying that, but former Royal Commissioner Alistair McEwen, hello to you, who I worked with at the Disability Royal Commission, and also some of the co-hosts for this year for the Open Dialogue events. So I see Sam's been in the chat, and as well as Andrew, and any of those others that I may have missed. Good to see you all as well. As we've heard today, it's been a big year for all of us, including the Disability Dialogue. I started here only in July, but it feels like about 2 years ago, but I'm only still fresh, a little bit fresh, but I've been here since then, but really excited to tell you about a very new project that we're launching for the Disability Dialogue called the Feature Dialogue. So our very first Feature Dialogue, it's a project that explores a problem that's been around for a long time. And we talk about to people with disability and their communities to hear what they think. So together we look for new ideas to help improve the situation. And our first Feature Dialogue, which kicks off tomorrow, I can't believe it. It feels like it's been a long time coming, is on foundational supports and local services that help people with disability, their families and carers. They're especially useful foundational supports for people who aren't a part of the NDIS. So I'm going to bring up the slideshow now, which you can see on the screen, which has 5 circles representing 5 stages that are involved in a feature dialogue. I'm going to talk you through each of the stages now as best as I can to explain how the feature dialogue works. The biggest thing I think what's really exciting is that this has never really been done like this before. So there's going to be lots of learning along the way. But stage 0, as you can see, is called prepare. So that's where we bring together a group of people with lived experience who will guide the project of the feature dialogue. And this group is called the working group. Stage 1 is called explore, and it's where we look at what we already know, what the research already says about foundational supports. Stage 2 is called ask. So in this stage, we have groups of people coming together to have guided discussions, and we call these focus groups. The focus groups will come up with ideas for how to make foundational supports work really well for people with disability. And at this stage, we're looking for lots of big ideas. Stage 3 is called decide, and it's where smaller groups come together to think about the ideas from the focus groups and talk about them deeply and decide which ones they think are realistic and could work. And then stage 4 is called agree. At this stage, the feature dialogue working group puts everything together in a final report, and we share it with big decision makers. In this case, we're going to be sharing it with Minister Mark Butler and Minister Jenny McAllister. And right now, there's a really exciting opportunity for you guys out there who are watching today to be involved in the focus groups. We're looking to find around 40 to 60 people to be in the focus groups, and we'll come together to have guided discussions come up with ideas for how to make foundational supports work well. It's a paid opportunity for those that get chosen, and it's a really exciting chance to be a part of this exciting new way of thinking through challenges in our community. If being a part of the focus group sounds like something that you would like to do, you can find out more by visiting our Disability Dialogue website and also clicking through to projects and the feature dialogue. And we're also going to share that link in the chat now to find out more for yourselves. And now I know that's quite a lot to take in, but you can visit the website to find out more or send us an email, and we'll put the email address also in the chat. And this diagram and a bit of an easier read as well is also available on our website. But before I hand it back over to Kelly and Todd, I also wanted to give you a bit of a rundown, I guess, of some of the events we have planned for next year for more open dialogue events. So I'm going to show a bit of a slide up there on the screen now, which has a list of the event topics for next year, which I'll read through now. So in February, we'll be exploring the topic of education, and that's around barriers to education enrollment for young people exiting school and hoping to go on to higher education. In March, we're going to be talking about relationships and intimacy. In April, we're going to be talking about ableism and the impact of internalized ableism. And in May and June, we'll be talking about how people with disability are affected by the criminal justice system. So that's things like the law and other things. So that's a really big topic. So we're going to do 2 events on that one. So kind of like a part 1, and then again in June, we'll do part 2. And we'll have the save the dates up on the website for those events, so you can register for them now and get them in your calendars nice and early. I just want to say a big thank you to our partners at DANA, the Disability Advocacy Network Australia, MDI, Melbourne Disability Institute, Alliance 20, Inclusion Australia, and Essential Media for their work on the Disability Dialogue this year. And a big thank you to the Disability Dialogue team, my team, who are helping in the background and in the front and all the places. Thank you so much for your work this year. We're a fairly new team, so really great to have you all on board. And also just want to say a big thank you to all the interpreters for this year who have taken part in the open dialogues or the feature dialogues or any part of this, as well as the support workers as well, who've helped to have people participate. And everyone that's been involved in the disability dialogue, whether you've been here on the chat or in the focus groups or, even done a survey online. It's been really great to see open watch parties as well with some of the Alliance 20 groups and others. So however you've participated, it's really great to see you all come together and create a safe space for people with disabilities in our communities to have conversations and work through the topics that matter to you and to all of us here at the Disability Dialogue. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to see what we do next year. And like Naz said, if you celebrate, have a great Christmas and also holiday, and make sure you're nice and safe. And we'll see you in 2026. Back to you, Kelly.
Thanks so much, Carly. I know we're all looking forward to some really exciting times ahead. And I did see a couple of comments pop up in the chat that some really great topics there. So we had planned on bringing Naz back here for some more Q&A, but unfortunately you can't predict the news cycle, and Naz did have to jump off early today. But that's actually good news. Silver lining is it means there's more time for Carly to answer questions. So if you have any questions for Carly, please send them through. And I can see, so our first question for you, Carly, is, are there going to be more feature dialogues after this one? And do we know what those topics of those future feature dialogues might be?
Yeah, so we at the Disability Dialogue, we're going to be doing 2 feature dialogues. So they're kind of 6 to 8 month long-standing projects that we're looking at those really hard topics and unpacking them, like we just said, and coming up with solutions. So we do 2 of those a year. And we're also going to be doing the open dialogues throughout the year each month. So I know it can be tricky when you're listening, feature dialogue, open dialogue, which one's which. I think once everyone sees the feature dialogue kicking off, you'll see how they work, and we will have more coming up. We don't have the next topics chosen yet for a feature dialogue, what our next one's going to be, but we also do have a steering committee that I want to just give a shout out to before I forget, because I will with my my ADHD. But big shout out to the steering committee who has newly formed for the Disability Dialogue, and they are going to have a really big feed into feature dialogue topics, and we'll be going to them for our second steering committee meeting. Oh gosh, early, I can't believe I'm saying it, December, which is only next week? Crazy. So the steering committee are going to feed in with feature dialogue topics. And if you have an idea for an open dialogue topic, if you're watching and you think this might be a really good topic, we always would love to hear that. So please feed in by emailing us as well. We would love to hear from you.
Carly, a question has been asked about how they can stay up to date about opportunities to be
Yeah.
involved in the focus groups for the dialogues.
Yep. So you can sign up to our mailing list, and you can send us an email. So we send out pretty regular emails to our mailing list to be involved in lots of different things. So our focus groups at the moment, we are recruiting, like I said, so you can sign up for that. But basically going to our website, disabilitydialogue.com.au, which is in the chat now. If you sign up there to get updates, regular updates, you'll hear about all the things that the Disability Dialogue are doing at what time. So, and if anything you see that where you go, oh, I want that in this type of format, please let us know as well, because we're here to make the Disability Dialogue accessible for all as best we can. And we won't know until we know, if we haven't already covered it. So please feel free to get in touch. We love to hear from you.
All right, it's Kelly speaking. Doing some pretty big things, and someone is keen to know how big the Disability Dialogue team is.
Oh, well, maybe if my team members are online. So we've only just got a bit of a team. It's been a crazy couple of months. I started in July as the Disability Dialogue Director. We have Leah, if she would like to put her camera on, if she's still on. Leah McPherson is with the dialogue at the moment as a bit of a project manager. We have Kelly Trelaw, who's just started, who's co-hosting today. And let me see if I can remember Kelly's title, Operations and Engagement Manager. Look at that. I'm cheating because I have things that I have to have on my wall that help me with my accessible needs to remember things. We also have Bernard Namok, if Bernard's on and want to give a wave. Bernard is our First Nations engagement lead for Queensland. He's based in Cairns, a Torres Strait Islander man. Also Nancy Bates, if she is online, if Nancy wants to give a wave. She's our First Nations lead in South Australia, based in Adelaide. And we also have Caitlin Hurley, if Caitlin's online. You also see her in the chat sometimes. Caitlin is our comms officer, doing a great job behind the scenes. And also Kelly Cox, who you all would have seen as well in other previous open dialogues co-hosting. And Kelly is our strategic partnerships and sector advisor. Basically, we're the team at the Disability Dialogue who works behind the scenes to make the Disability Dialogue happen, along with our steering committee, our partners, and all of you.
Sam asks if the focus groups for the future dialogue are going to be online or in person.
Yep, sure are. They're going to be online, Sam. So all the information about the feature dialogue, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email through, and someone can also get in touch with you if you have any more questions. But yep, they're all based online, which is really good for people's access needs in 2020 what are we, 25, almost 26.
Thanks. And just before I jump into, is Kelly speaking again? Our very newest disability dialogue person only
Oh my
started
goodness, I
last
forgot
week.
she's
No,
not on my
no,
list yet.
I can picture your list of people and know you haven't updated it
I haven't
with your
uploaded
pencil.
that yet. Laura, I'm so sorry. Laura, as well, is in our access and inclusion role, and she's brand new, hence why she's not on my list on my wall. So I'm so sorry, Laura. Yeah, I can't even keep count anymore of who's who, which is a great thing because it means we have a full team. So sorry, Laura.
We love Laura.
Thanks.
No, that's all right. Now, Carly, we have asked all of our speakers today, so now it's your turn. What's been one of your highlights from 2025?
Is it bad to say that I've been able to come to the disability dialogue and do some work? It has been a big highlight for me because I stepped out of the disability sector for probably the past year and a bit after some burnout, which happens. I know we all can experience that. And I took a bit of a break away from the sector, and then the role came up here at the Disability Dialogue, and my highlight has been coming back to the sector and actually working with people with disability again, hearing stories and advocating for people's human rights. That's what I love to do. So to be back in the space has been my highlight for sure.
We're going to wrap things up now, so I want to take the opportunity to thank all our speakers for their time today. Naz, Natalie, and Carly, they were all incredible to hear from. It's been a super interesting conversations, and like many topics of the dialogue, we could talk about this for so much longer than the hour and a half we had allotted. As we mentioned before, this is the last event of the year, but as Carly said, you can register for the first event of 2026 now, which is kicking off on Wednesday, the 25th of February. We're still locking in guests, but if you register now, you can at least save the date in your diary and to be the first to know when the topic is locked in.
And one last thing, we want to hear from all of you about what you thought about today's event. And we take that feedback really, really seriously. So if you have a few moments to complete a survey, we would really, really appreciate that. When this event finishes, a survey will pop up on your screen. It's also available now in the chat. And there is also an easy read version. So please do tell us what you thought of today. And I gather there'll be opportunities to talk about what you've thought if you've participated in other open dialogues. We really look forward to seeing you next year at our event in February after a great break. So in the meantime, we hope you have a really lovely festive season and that there's time for some rest, relaxation, and some fun. So thank you, everyone, and bye for now.
Bye.